The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, figuring they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
Welcome to the midwinter holiday, brought to you by the National Football League, the Super Bowl. People who never watch football all year long watch this game, which is the reason I don't go to Super Bowl parties, because I like to watch the actual game. I actually like to watch the commercials without other people talking. But it is a time for people to get together and celebrate football. And mazel tov to all who made this happen, going back to Pete Rozelle, who understood marketing better than anybody else. And here we are with this absolute bonanza coming up on Sunday with, I'm sure, record television ratings and the anointment of Patrick Mahomes as the greatest to ever walk the earth. I get really frustrated at these lists that are being put out. Oh, if they win on Sunday, are Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid the greatest quarterback-coach combo in history? Can only compare between eras. And, you know, you have to look at what Bill Walsh did with Joe Montana. They didn't win 3 straight, but they won 3 together, and they had such a great team left behind for that George Seifert could win a 4th one with Montana. Joe Gibbs. Joe Gibbs won 3 Super Bowls with 3 quarterbacks, none of whom will get in the Hall of Fame, but all we do are make these coach and quarterback combos. And I think that only highlights how good a coach Joe Gibbs was. But when you get in the conversation of the greatest ever, nobody mentions his name. Okay? He's not there with Lombardi. He's not there with Walsh. But he should be. And I think as we move further and further in the distance from what he did, I think you got to consider him to be the greatest, because the quarterback now, as we're seeing here, and we have the benefit now of Jayden Daniels, and I will get to Jayden Daniels and the award that he won last night, which was probably the least surprising sports news we've had here in decades. We'll get to that. But, it just shows you how much a quarterback means. And when anyone has asked me, who do you think is going to win on Sunday, I always say the same thing: never bet against Mahomes. And just about every interview that I've watched from New Orleans this week ends with a prediction, and whoever is making that prediction says, never bet against Mahomes. Could be that the gig is up on Sunday. We'll find out. But if there's time on the clock and he has the ball with a chance to win, chances are he's going to win the game. Before we get to Jayden and Rookie of the Year, let me just comment a little bit on the Maryland game, which I watched start to finish last night. Hadn't played in a week, and I thought maybe they'd be a little rusty getting out of the gate. They played great at the beginning. They got a 17-point lead in the first half on the road. That's tough to do in a Big Ten game. But then, I don't know, something just fell apart there in the first half. Julian Reese had a good game at 24 points, and he knocked down foul shots, which he couldn't do last year. He's 10 of 11 from the line. He also had 13 rebounds, but they missed 9 free throws, which really killed them. And Reese said it felt like we got a little bit complacent. We stopped making shots. We started to fall back, and you see what happened. Their defense was terrible in the second half, and the game was won on a 3-point bank shot, like you see in the park. Somebody just throwing it up. Bruce Thornton, who was unstoppable in the second half. He had 31 in the game, 21 in the second half. Hits a bank shot, and it just seemed inevitable that Maryland was going to lose this game, and they lost the game 73-7. They're still in good shape. They were ranked this week. They're still 7-5 in the Big Ten. They got a bunch of home games coming up, starting with Rutgers on Sunday, 17-6 overall. And I just want to make a point about the Rutgers game that is a noon tip in College Park on Sunday, and it reminded me of Super Bowl Sunday in 1973. When Maryland played a conference game at home against a team with a generational superstar and, frankly, the best college basketball player I've ever seen, David Thompson. And Maryland had a really great team as well. They had John Lucas was the point guard on that team with Tom McMillan and Len Elmore. All those guys played in the NBA, and Lucas was the number one pick. The other two were first-rounders. They were a great team, but NC State was the better team that day. They weren't eligible to play in the NCAA tournament because they had cheated to get David Thompson, but it proved to be worth it the next year when they won the whole thing, stopping UCLA seven championship streak. Yeah, they won 7 straight, and they stopped them 1974. But I remember that game, going to that game, coming home incredibly disappointed that Maryland lost at the end with David Thompson having a putback for the game winner. You weren't allowed to dunk in those days, and that NC State won the game. And then I went home and watched the Redskins lose to the Miami Dolphins 14-7, and I just saw today that Howard Twilley had passed away at the age of 81. And if you need something else to make you feel old, as I do, hearing that Howard Twilley was 81, wow, 81 years old, and he caught the first touchdown of the game. He was a great college player as well, played at Tulsa at a time when college teams didn't throw the football. And he set records in 1965, 134 receptions for 1,700 yards in a single year, finished runner-up to Mike Garrett for the Heisman in 65. But Howard Twilley passing away, and he later said, I wouldn't trade that touchdown for $20 million. He got into money management after his career. He must have managed a lot of money to make that statement. But, yeah, that was a memory that was not great. It was great to see a big game between Maryland and NC State, 2 of the top 5 teams in the country. It was great to see the Redskins in the Super Bowl. It was devastating to watch them both lose on Super Bowl Sunday in 1973. All right, to last night, they had the awards. Jayden Daniels had already won the Pepsi Rookie of the Year. He had been the Pepsi Offensive Rookie of the Week 11 times during the season. So there wasn't any question about this. And then at night, they gave up in a big glitzy ceremony. And by the way, if you haven't seen Bill Belichick with his 24-year-old girlfriend who's wearing virtually nothing, you owe it to yourself to look up the pictures on that. Anybody that thinks that Bill Belichick is too old might want to have a look at those pictures. Anyway, Jayden Daniels was almost unanimous. I don't know how the voting is broken down and if the voters are announced, but there were 50 first-place votes. He got 49 of them. I don't know who didn't vote for Jayden Daniels for Rookie of the Year, but somebody didn't. But enough did that he was the runaway winner and accepted the award last night in New Orleans.
2024 AP Offensive Rookie of the Year is
Jayden Daniels!
Then you got to have some walk-up music. He's got to amble his way to the stage, looking very fly, wearing sunglasses, the usual Jayden Daniels cool as he saunters up to the stage and gives the acceptance speech, thanking, among other people, Mom. Yeah. There we go.
Man, where I'll start? Crazy. First and foremost, I want to thank God, for allowing me to be in this presence of greatness, being on this stage, man. I want to thank my mom that's in the stands. I want to thank my family back home. Shout out to y'all for helping me get to this point. Washington Commanders, Josh Harris, and all you guys. Thank you guys for changing my life, for drafting me. Everybody back home, the DMV, the Washington fan base. Man, appreciate you guys. Shout out to my boys, Malik and Brian, man. Love y'all. Couldn't be at this point without y'all. I know it's competing each and every week, man, but love y'all, and thank you to everybody.
There you go. Jayden Daniels, Rookie of the Year. The other awards, not too much of a surprise. I mean, Dan Quinn got some consideration for Coach of the Year, but remember, this is a regular season award only. And Kevin O'Connell with Sam Darnold, retread quarterback on his 4th team. They won 14 games, so he was named Coach of the Year. And I don't know what the exact criteria is for Walter Payton Man of the Year. It's leadership. It's work in the community. Bobby Wagner was great in all those things. He didn't win it. Eric Armstead of Jacksonville won it. That's fine. And then the moment of the year, was the Hail Mary pass that Jayden Daniels got an award for that, the Hail Mary pass to beat the Chicago Bears in that game in October. And you talk about two franchises going in opposite directions. That was the game that changed it really for both of them. So quite a night. Also, we got the word on who made the Hall of Fame. They used to do this on the day before the Super Bowl. You used to find out Saturday afternoon who got in. I guess they changed the whole scheduling. So last night they announced the class, and kind of a surprise that Eli Manning did not get in. There were others who would get consideration as well who did not make it. They went small, the smallest class they've had since 2005. That's when Dan Marino, Steve Young, Fritz Pollard, and Benny Friedman made it. So two great quarterbacks making it, along with two old-time guys. The four who made it this year: Antonio Gates, the tight end for the Chargers; Eric Allen, played in Philadelphia, played with the Raiders; Jared Allen, who was a defensive end with Minnesota and Kansas City, got in. And here's the one that, continues to bother me about Joe Jacoby being left out. The seniors committee put in Sterling Sharp. And Sterling Sharp had a shortened career because of a neck issue. He was great while he played, but he only played 7 seasons. Wasn't able to continue. And I think he benefits from Shannon Sharp, who's on TV all the time, who in his Hall of Fame acceptance speech said he was the second best football player in his family. And the push that he got from Sterling is the reason that he got in. Joe Jacoby played 13 years in the NFL. He was 4 times a Pro Bowler, twice All-Pro. More importantly, he was the mainstay on that offensive line for all 4 of the Super Bowl appearances and the 3 Super Bowl victories. But I've talked about it till I'm blue in the face. And it's just a shame that these other guys get in who, okay, you can make the case that they are as deserving, but not more deserving. They're just not. It's just not fair. And go through another go-round next year. Twice he was a finalist for in the regular voting with the regular committee, which used to be just all writers. I think it has some broadcasters with it now. But just the shaft for Joe Jacoby, and that's the 4 who got in this year. All right, a couple of other things from yesterday. Jayden made the radio row rounds again, partly because he was Pepsi Rookie of the Year, so he got a nice little jacket for that and a very heavy trophy, which he schlepped around from interview table to interview table. I want to play some of the highlights of this. He wound up on the Pat McAfee show, and McAfee, I don't know if you ever watch the show. I watch it rarely, but he does most of the talking, but he's got like 7 or 8 other guys there. And he lets them ask questions. He calls on them, like in class, to ask questions. He could probably do the show with 1 or 2 other guys, but it's his show. They pay him to do it. It's not a salary thing. They buy the show, and he hires who he wants to hire. So these guys are all sitting around on the couch, and Jayden walks in with the trophy, and then they talk about what the season was and how it all played out. And one of the questions was about what Cliff Kingsbury has meant. And I'll say this about Jayden. His news conferences are not very compelling. He's cooperative. He answers the question, but he's not expansive. And maybe he's not fully relaxed in that situation yet. He seemed to be more relaxed in these kind of sit-down interviews that he did. And this was Jayden with McAfee yesterday, and the question of what Cliff Kingsbury has meant to him.
If you know Cliff, like, Cliff is the coolest guy ever. Like,
always?
Always.
In game, too?
Always. Fashionable. In game, he kind of gets, like, he might get a little pissed off. He might get a little ramped up and stuff like that. But other than that, man, Cliff is cool. Like, on a daily basis, you could go to Cliff and talk to him about anything.
So brand new vibe in the building. You don't know that because it's your first year over there. But I'm assuming the fans have told you, like, hey, thank you so much for getting us out of the hellhole that we've been in for, the last 3 decades, basically, in this entire thing?
I got a couple of those.
Fans very appreciative, I assume?
Yeah, we were on the plane, me and my mom flying here, and then one of the fans told my mom, like, your son's, like, not knowing I was sitting right next to her because I was all covered up. And it told my mom, like, your son saved my life.
I've heard your mom talk a few times. She's awesome.
Yeah, she is. She right there.
Hey, Mom,
what up? Hey, single for the rest of his life.
I don't know about that.
I'm going to come on your show and tell the real story.
Okay. Sounds good to me. We watched that video. We loved everything about it because she's looking out for you. And it feels like your family, everything over there is beloved. So good for you. D-Bud has a question for you.
Yeah, AJ asked you about Cliff, and I just want to ask you, how much input did you have going into the game plan? Because watching you talked about what defenses try to do to rookie quarterbacks. I felt like you guys are almost on attack mode, played more up-tempo than anybody, went for it on fourth down more than anybody. How much input did you have going into the week-to-week game plan?
A lot. I mean, there was times like me and Cliff, like we'll practice something, and like if I didn't like it, like I'll go to Cliff office. I'm not gonna do it in person, but I'll go like his office, like, hey Cliff, I don't like that. Like that gotta go.
Yeah.
Like cut that. And we might have like a little debate of like, oh no, I think it'll work through this, and then I'm like, all right, I'll give you one more try. And if I didn't like it, or like he didn't like it, look right, he's cutting stuff out the playbook.
Love that.
That's a veteran mindset, though. You know, like, did he tell you early, like, hey, I'm going to need you to act like a 28-year-old, 29-year-old, this is your team?
Nah, he just said.
Not always easy for a rookie to come in and be a leader.
He told me, like, because I knew Cliff prior, like, because when I was at ASU, he was at Arizona. So, like, we crossed paths a couple times, but I just knew, like, we had that relationship. And as we built it, he was like, hey, like, you can come to me. Like, if you don't like something, like, just let me know. And I was like, all right, bet. And there was sometimes where it was like, we'll practice something. I'm like, yeah, Cliff, I don't like it. Like, this got to go.
Now, that may not be new information to you. Those are things that he said in news conferences. I just want you to hear how he seems to be letting his hair down a little bit. And I think as time goes on, as he hopefully moves closer and closer to a Hall of Fame career and also wins Super Bowls and things like that, that he'll become a little bit more comfortable in front of the media. This was Daniels when he showed up on the Pro Football Talk set with Mike Florio and Chris Sims, and they talked about his ability, which we've been talking about all year, to stay calm and shake off the mistakes.
Like, I'm always confident in myself, but, like, just going out there and, like say I make a mistake, like, oh, throw a pick or something, like, I have such a good room in the quarterback room. Like, the QB coach come like, okay, what'd you see? And I'll just tell him, and he'd be like, all right, let's go, let's move on, and that'll just be it.
Right.
Malik Neighbors was with us yesterday, and he explained how the impact of having a guy like you at quarterback, how that affects the rest of the team. Do you feel that? Do you sense that? And do you understand the importance of that, where if you were acting differently, these guys are going to be all screwed up, and you provide them all a calm?
Yeah, I think so. I think as the season went on, like, I kind of learned that, like, just talking to the different vets and stuff like that. And obviously, when we got to the postseason, the team voted captains and they voted me one. So I was like a huge, like, blessing and respect that I earned from my teammates, and just how I show up there every day, how I carry myself. And I just seen, like, if I say something, like, the team's gonna listen.
You know what he kind of reminds me of? He reminds me of like a high school freshman who's good enough to start on the varsity, and he defers so much to his teammates. He's the stud now. He's the guy that they look up to, and maybe things will change in his second year, but whenever he talks about playing with this team, oh, what a great honor it was to be named a captain. I felt so good about that. That's that's a rare quality that he's got. And I think it's just, so refreshing. Last thing is about Magic Johnson and Magic's involvement with the team. I thought when it was announced that he was going to become a partner that they would push him out in front a little bit more often. But with all this winning, they haven't had to do that. But he's involved. He stays involved with the team. He was at the playoff game in Detroit, and he keeps a finger on what's going on and is accessible. And Jayden was asked about the relationship that he has with Magic.
I could call Magic for sure.
It's got that. We got that now.
Yeah.
When did you hit that level of I can call Magic whenever?
I think he came and talked to us, and me and him had a conversation for the first time. And from there, he's like, hey, like, just hit me up wherever you need.
Do you like, you're young.
Yeah.
Magic's my time.
I know about Magic.
Showtime
for sure.
and the Lakers.
Showtime Lakers. I'm a Laker fan.
I know you
California. So for sure, I know my history on that.
You know your history. I that's what I like about you. You know, you're a junkie.
For sure. Got to be.
All sports, I mean?
No, just football and basketball.
That's your two.
Yeah, that's my two.
That's your two.
And I don't know whether he knows this about Magic because it was before he was born. But remember, Magic won the national championship at Michigan State, number one pick of the draft, goes to the Lakers. And the Lakers won the championship in his rookie year. And in clinching it, cemented his legacy because it's an often told story. The Lakers had to go to Philadelphia. It was Game 6. They could close it out, but even if they didn't, they'd go back to Los Angeles and they could win it there in 7. But their best player, Magic was a superstar, but the best player on that team was Kareem. And Kareem didn't even make the trip to Philadelphia because his ankle was in such bad shape. Magic Johnson said, not to worry. He sat in the seat that Kareem sat in on the team plane. He played center in the game. He had 42 points, and they closed it out. And Jayden has that kind of style, panache. He didn't quite pull off what Magic did, but he went so much further than anybody would have expected. I think the comparisons between the two are very, very apt, and also their demeanor, the same way, the smiles, and the way the way that Magic just loved playing basketball, and the way that Jayden clearly loves playing football. All right, Joe Gibbs with memories of the 3 Super Bowl championships that he won. This was part of something that was put out on his website, and I pulled some of the highlights of that, which we will get to, and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
I forgot to mention this about the Maryland matchup on Sunday as they take on Rutgers. And, tough loss last night at Ohio State, but a chance to bounce back. They're still in good shape for the NCAA tournament, but all this winning by the Wizards, they go for 4 straight tonight at home against Cleveland. It's put them a little bit of jeopardy of not having the most ping pong balls in the hopper for the NBA draft lottery. And it looks right now like the Cooper flag lottery. But there are 2 players to keep an eye on for Rutgers if the ball doesn't land at number 1 for them. One of them is Dylan Harper. He's a 6'6 freshman guard. And the other is Ace Bailey, who's 6'10. He's kind of a forward/center. I guess he play more forward, though. And those 2 guys could wind up, as a Wizard. One of them might. And, I just think of the name Ace Bailey. Ace Bailey was one of the early stars of the Capitals when they were a bad team. And tragically, he was killed in the Pentagon crash in 9/11. But that'd be something to have Ace Bailey back in Washington playing for the Wizards. But we'll see how that works out. Anyway, Joe Gibbs put this out, I guess, on his own website. They wanted to have his memories of the 3 Super Bowl championships. And his memory, I'll say this, Gibbs is in his 80s now, and he's still very, very sharp, and it's great when he shows up. And if you read the Don Van Natta, Seth Wickersham piece a couple of weeks ago about how Dan Snyder is, quote, effing angry about what's going on here with the winning, and that he in a last-ditch petulant move, attempted to hang on to the team by not giving his bank information to the Josh Harris group so they could make the wire transfer for the sale. And it was Gibbs that was able to talk little Danny off the ledge. So in my mind, that's worth another Lombardi for him. But he's got 3 of them. And on the website, they took a look back at his memories of the 3 Super Bowls. Now, he mixes up a couple of things, which I cut out. One, he was talking about the 82 team as being plus 43 on turnover margin. That was the team the following year, the 83 team that lost to the Raiders in the Super Bowl. He also will talk about being down on his knees before the John Riggins run in Super Bowl 17. He was down on his knees before the final play against Minnesota in the NFC Championship game in 1988. But by and large, he's, still very, very sharp and still has some really great memories. Sometimes he mixes up a couple of things, but just to hear him talk about the glory days sends a chill up my spine. So I pulled some of the things that he said in this little documentary that they put out about the 3 Super Bowl championships, starting with the first one in January 1983 at the Rose Bowl, where they played the Miami Dolphins in the strike year. And nobody expected Washington to be there because the Cowboys were favored to beat them in the NFC Championship game. That didn't happen. The Redskins won the game. Short week. They don't have the 2 weeks then because they had to compress everything due to the strike. And they wind up, and all the gear that was given out for the NFC people was blue because it was assumed it was going to be the Cowboys. But the Redskins were underdogs, but not as much as I think Gibbs thought. They were 3-point underdogs going into this game against Miami, and this is his recollection of Super Bowl Sunday back in 1983 as he's getting ready to play the Dolphins.
We get there, and we're the big underdogs. I went out in that morning on the patio right outside of my motel room there, and I was reading out the Bible, and it came up David and Goliath. And I was thinking to myself, that's perfect for me because we were the big underdogs. We were going to be David. And so I figured, what the heck? We got a chance to win this thing. Let's go.
Yeah. Now, there were two huge plays in this game that made it closer than it should have been. One of them was in the first half where there was a blown coverage, and I can still see Mark Murphy pointing. Get over and get him. Nobody covered Jimmy Cephalo, and Cephalo caught a big touchdown pass to put them ahead. And then going into the half, Fulton Walker returned a kickoff for a touchdown. Those were the two touchdowns that they scored. They also got a field goal, but otherwise they were kept out of the end zone. But Washington was behind in the fourth quarter, and in the most famous play in the history of the franchise, and in those days, going for it on fourth down wasn't like today. And it was fourth and really, really short, fourth and less than a yard. They called timeout, and then what follows is the greatest play, the most celebrated play, the one that certainly puts John Riggins number one in the hearts and minds of many who watched this team over the years. It was the touchdown run, the 43-yard touchdown run that put the game away. Here's Gibbs with his recollections of that.
We get there, and we're the big underdogs. I went out in that morning.
Excuse me, Coach. This is the coach's recollections of the big touchdown.
Riggins. He's going to go all the way unless Blackwood can catch him, and he can't.
I can remember calling this play. And I actually went down on my knees on the sideline. Okay, this is I left tight wing, fake zoom, 70 chip. I'll always remember that. I think it's probably the most famous play in Redskin history.
Look what happens to McNeil.
That's I left tight wing, and what the safety does when he comes over here, he just shears off of John. And John had a knack in big games. I'll say that for John Riggins. And our offensive line obviously deserves a lot of credit. And those are times in a game where you make a call and you've just made the decision to probably go either win the game or lose the game. And I thought that's what this was.
That was a moment in time, and it will never be forgotten. That was the touchdown that cinched the game, 27-17. Here's a story I never heard before. This is the post game of Super Bowl 17 and Gibbs' memory of what happened to his wife.
I get separated from Pat, and she got on a bus because she thought that's where all the wives were going. And we didn't get back together until maybe 2 o'clock in the morning, and it was at a Bob's Big Boy.
Can you imagine stumbling into a Bob's Big Boy in Los Angeles at 2 o'clock in the morning? And you see Joe Gibbs having dinner finally with his wife, and you got to be thinking to yourself, oh, man, I got to stop drinking. That looks like Joe Gibbs and his wife. Imagine that. You imagine Joe Gibbs also walking up to the wait stand table for two. Oh, okay, sure. And, it's possible whoever was, hosting at that point at Bob's Big Boy didn't know who he was. But you imagine that? Joe Gibbs and his wife sitting down having dinner at 2 o'clock in the morning, and you're trying to, take the edge off a night of drinking. Oh, my God, that's Joe Gibbs there. The next year, they got back. They got their doors blown off by the Raiders, 38-9. The rushing record that John Riggins had set at 166 yards was broken by Marcus Allen, and it was just a miserable experience. They did not get back the following year. They lost in a playoff game at home to the Chicago Bears. That was the 84 Bears, not the 85 Bears. 85, Joe Theismann breaks his leg. That's the end of John Riggins. 1986, they lose to the Giants in the NFC Championship game 17-0. But after the 87 season, which there was another strike, and that's when they had the scab players, and Gibbs went 3-0 with them, beating some teams that brought back veterans. They go back to the Super Bowl. They go to San Diego, and they're playing the Denver Broncos. And what unfolded in the second quarter is just unbelievable explosion offensively, and it turned Doug Williams not into just a trailblazer, becoming the first African-American quarterback to start a Super Bowl, but one who stands the test of time as having the most unbelievable one-quarter performance.
They're playing Denver. They got Elway. And so I was so nervous about this. And in the first quarter, we got off to a terrible start. It was 10-0 in the first quarter. And our players, I remember them coming off the field, guys were so frustrated because we felt like, we just weren't playing well. The other thing that happened to us in this game in the first quarter, Doug gets hit, and he actually did kind of a split. And Doug has a bad knee. And at that point, I kind of thought, gosh, this may be something where he's not even going to be able to play the rest of the game. And I actually sent Schrader into the game, but Doug waved him off. And so we start the second quarter. I call Charlie 10 Hitch the first play of the second quarter. I'll always remember it. And Charlie 10 Hitch is just a 5-yard hitch by our receivers, but you can see at the top of the screen there, Ricky Sanders gets pressed. Okay, football players have to be smart. You have to adjust, which means that play now turns into a deep pass, a fade. And so that's Ricky. And this play right here, from this point on, I honestly think I could have shut my eyes with the game plan, pointed, called a play, and it would have been 8 yards.
It did seem that way. 4 touchdown passes for Williams in that second quarter. Also, Timmy Smith had a TD, so it's 35-10 going in the half, and then Timmy Smith scored another touchdown in the second half to get closer to his record, which still stands today, 204 yards rushing in that Super Bowl, a complete blowout of the Denver Broncos. One slight little correction there. Doug Williams did hurt his knee, but he did come out of the game. He put Schrader in for a couple of plays, and Schrader took a sack on one of them. They had to punt, but what Gibbs is talking about, how they began the second quarter just raining touchdowns on the Broncos, was just unbelievable. And to be there, I remember I was sitting in auxiliary press at it was Jack Murphy Stadium, and Jack Murphy Stadium is no longer a place that they hold Super Bowls because it was considered to be too small. Then, of course, the Chargers moved to Los Angeles. But auxiliary press meant sitting in the stands. So at the beginning of the game, there were a whole bunch of Bronco fans behind us. And, man, when they went up 10-0, they were yelling their lungs out. And then as the touchdown passes started raining out of the sky, they disappeared, and that was the end of them. And that was just a great, great day, and a great Super Bowl, and historic one for Doug Williams. They get back to the Super Bowl after the 91 season. Now we get to, 1980, the 88 season. That's the only losing season that Gibbs had in his first go-round. They went 7-9 that year. The 89 season, they get better, but they missed the playoffs because they lost to the Cowboys in the one game that the Cowboys won. That team still finished 10-6. They would have been 11-5 without that Cowboy loss. They missed the playoffs. They get back in 90. They make it to the second round, to the divisional round, and they lose to the San Francisco 49ers. And then in 1991, they are just dominant. They roll through the season. They could have been undefeated. They lost to Dallas on Thanksgiving weekend, and they lost again in the last game of the year to the Philadelphia Eagles, but that's because Gibbs was resting everybody for the playoffs. They roll through the Atlanta Falcons in the seat cushion game in the divisional round at RFK, and they blow the doors off the Detroit Lions 41-10 to get back to the Super Bowl. They're playing the Buffalo Bills. Now, the Buffalo Bills hadn't really become the Buffalo Bills story yet, because the year before, they had a chance to win, and if Scott Norwood kicks that 48-yard field goal, they're defending Super Bowl champs. But Norwood is wide right, Giants win, and now it's the Redskins' turn to play the Buffalo Bills. And what was a close game against the Giants the year before was not close at all. And the final score of this game, 37-24, doesn't tell you anything, because pretty much the Bills scored 2 garbage time touchdowns. This was a completely dominant performance offensively and defensively for Washington, with Mark Rippon winning the MVP and Gibbs remembering, and he didn't usually say these kind of things, but how easy it was to win this game.
Everything about this Super Bowl wound up just going smoothly for us. We were practicing in a dome because the weather at that point in Minnesota. And John Madden came with the TV group, okay, to our practice. And honestly, these practices, they were so physical. Our guys were knocking the crap out of each other. And so I was actually cut practice short. And they said to me, they said that John Madden walked off with his TV crew and he turned to him and said, "This is not going to be close."
And it was not. It was not a close game as the Redskins won their 3rd Super Bowl in 9 years, and in their 4th Super Bowl appearance over that period of time, established themselves as one of the great dynasties in the history of the NFL. And again, in retrospect, 3 different quarterbacks, Joe Theismann, Doug Williams, Mark Rippon, none of whom will ever be in the Hall of Fame. And Joe Gibbs won with all of them. 3 different running backs. John Riggins in the first one. Timmy Smith in the second one. Ernest Biner in the third one. Riggins is in the Hall of Fame. The other 2 are not. And it's just a remarkable coaching job. And I remember Charlie Casserly talking about that 87 season when they had the strike and they brought in the scab players. And he said the way that Gibbs was able to coach those guys to play like they did, to play as hard as they did, and even knowing that they were going to lose their jobs after the third one, where they played the Cowboys with a whole bunch of guys crossing the picket line, Hall of Famers like Tony Dorsett and Randy White and the starting quarterback, Danny White. These guys all came back, and Washington won that game. It's, it's part of Redskin lore. But, again, I think Joe Gibbs, when you talk about great coaches at this time of year, and coaches are generally judged on championships, he doesn't have 6 like Belichick, but he's got 3, and he didn't have Brady, So I think as you consider greatest coach at this time of year, let's not forget Joe Gibbs. This week that Commanders owner Josh Harris said the name is staying, and let's move on. Team is winning. People are feeling good about it, and we're not going to have any name discussion anymore. And however you feel about that, that's the way it's going to be. But he did say that they are going to connect to the past. And as he was walking into the awards ceremonies last night in in New Orleans, he did kind of a walk by with reporters, and somebody shouted, "Hey, what do you say to the people who don't like the name Commanders?" He said, "It's time to move on." But he was also asked about the uniforms, and he said, "We're going back to our brand." So I think, and I think this is a good thing, that the uniforms are not going to say Redskins on them. They may not even say Commanders on them, but they may look a lot like the ones they wore from, let's see. Well, actually, they wore the same jerseys and pants once they went to Washington football team. All they did was take the logo off the helmet and put the numbers on there. So I think it's going to look pretty much like it did when they last wore them, which would have been the 2021 season, right? Because the 2022 was when they changed. So that was February of 2022. So the last 3 years they've worn these uniforms, which are okay. But, I think they will have a more traditional look coming up. And I don't know if they can do it for next season. Maybe they can. I don't know how fast these things can get done. But next season or 2, they will do that. So this is something you may not remember, but the greatest show on turf, which came out of nowhere, 1999. Who's this guy, Kurt Warner? Well, they've even made a movie about him. The guy that was stocking shelves at the grocery store back in Iowa shows up, and the Rams are suddenly the thing in the NFL. They get to the Super Bowl. They beat the Tennessee Titans, and the next season, they're just as explosive. They're blowing people out in the 2021 season. They get back to the Super Bowl. They are, I believe they were 9-point favorites against Tom Brady and the Patriots. 9-point favorites. And, of course, as you remember, Brady won the game, and Adam Vinatieri kicks through the game-winning field goal. Vinatieri, by the way, did not make the Hall of Fame last night. Kind of a surprise. But Anyway, they win that Super Bowl, and the Rams then begin to decline. 2002 is not as good. And turns out that Warner is hurt, but they don't reveal this. Brenda Warner, his wife, calls up KFNS radio and says, hey, nobody's given my husband an X-ray there. You know, that's wife interference. That's, you know, a no-no for anybody's job. You don't want your wife calling up the place where you work and complaining about the conditions. Then, following year, 2003, he loses his starting job to Mark Bolger. He's sitting on the bench. And Brenda Warner calls another radio station, WMLL, in St. Louis, and says if he's not going to play here, then he wants to play somewhere. So Kurt Warner has to smooth this over. Hey, wait a minute. Your wife is calling up a radio station and saying that the team should trade you? How's that working? He's got to work through that. So you heard earlier this week that Cooper Kupp put out a statement that the Rams are going to trade him and he doesn't want to be traded. Haven't heard anything from Matt Stafford, but his wife, Kelly Stafford, does a podcast. And she's talking about this, and she says, well, I didn't really want to say anything, but...
Hell, why not? My husband, wants to win. He's not trying to put a team in a bad situation. If you're catching my drift, you're catching my drift. I will say that the trading away of Cooper, I guess I'm just I'm confused because we were one play away from going to the NFC Championship. And I think if we go, we win. I have to be the dog in this situation, being like, I want the respect for him that he deserves. Yes, I love the city of LA. I love the city of LA. With that being said, I love an adventure.
Ooh, I love LA. But with that being said, I love an adventure. This is the Rams in St. Louis in 2025. The Rams in Los Angeles. The Rams in St. Louis in 2003. Brenda Warner says if he's not going to play, he wants to play somewhere. Whew. Now, Kurt Warner did wind up with the Giants in 2004. He was the starter before Eli Manning took over. Matt Stafford, he's won a Super Bowl with the Rams. He's coming back next year. He announced that. But the Cooper Kupp situation and the wife, Kelly, butting in, where does it go from here? Whew. Man, that is not something you want to deal with if you are running the Los Angeles Rams. If you are Sean McVay, the coach, you can't have the wife of the starting quarterback doing a podcast saying, yeah, we like it here, but we like to try someplace else. And somebody's got to be the dog here. Whoa. Hang on to your hat. Much different situation. Quarterback stability here in Washington with the mom being very happy with the way things are going. The mom, Jayden, not married, of course, lives with his mom, and she helps to protect him from a lot of things. But, man, that's not good at all. All right, coming up in the next hour, the quarterback who tried to get to 3 in a row and couldn't get there, Joe Montana. He was on Radio Row yesterday. We'll hear what he has to say about the difficulty in trying to three-peat. And also the list of the greatest halftime shows ever, which will give me my opportunity to tell my Up With People story once again. Stay with us. It's the Andy Pollard Show, ESPN 630. Yes. 1 year after John Riggins said he was bored and broke and came back, the Redskins won the Super Bowl. Could it be that 1 year after Jayden Daniels is named AP Offensive Rookie of the Year, that the Washington Commanders go on and win the Super Bowl? And could they be trying to stop a Kansas City Chiefs team that's going for a four-peat? And all this stuff about, oh, my God, he's better than Brady. He's already cinched it. Some are saying that about this game. I don't know how. He'd be at 4. Brady would be at 7, but... you know, in the era of recency, this is how things work. And the coronation of Patrick Mahomes may have already started, but it will really ramp up if the Kansas City Chiefs win on Sunday. But let's get to the important stuff, the food. On Sunday, Americans will eat 1.47 billion chicken wings. They will watch dozens of $7 million commercials and place more than $1 billion in bets on the game. That is the important stuff. The numbers for food, in case you're interested, if you're really on watch on what you're going to spend for your Super Bowl party, or if you're just having a party of one, here's what it's costing this year versus last year. Grocery store prices dropped 4.1% nationwide from the same week last year. How about that? They found prices fell from $6.69 to $4.49 for tortilla chips, from $3.16 to $2.51 for a can of chunky chili with beans. You're not going to eat chili out of a can for the Super Bowl. Okay. A container of guacamole went from $3.16 to $2.93 for a 16-ounce container. Right. That's and then for frozen pizza, $9.99 to $9.49. Again, you're not going to eat frozen pizza for the Super Bowl. Pizza places are open. What are the fresh stuff? In a separate report, industry researcher Pattern estimated that the average price of snacks sold on Amazon fell 3% in January from a year ago. That includes a 38% drop for tortilla chips. Wow, tortilla chips are really down this year. $12.95 last year to $8, 16% decline for hamburger patties, a 14% dip in ranch dressing, and an 11% decrease in mustard. You could buy mustard cheaper this year. The sticker price of French onion dip rose 10% from $2.50 last year to $2.75 this year. Prices also ticked up from 1 to 3% for a six-pack of soda, a 13-ounce bag of potato chips, and a 15-ounce container of medium queso. Okay, so there are your food prices for the Super Bowl. Yeah, the commercials now, $7 to $8 million for a 30-second spot. You may have seen some of them already. There's Matthew McConaughey doing a Mike Ditka impersonation. You know, he's a fan of this football team. He trotted out his Redskins jacket from when he was a kid. I may have seen that picture online this week. There's a Meg Ryan and Billy Crystal spot, which celebrates their scene in Katz's Deli from years ago, from When Harry Met Sally. It's for Hellman's Mayonnaise. I think you would have trouble getting Hellman's Mayonnaise in Katz's Deli. That's basically a mustard spot, but okay. And then Vin Diesel, Michelle Rodriguez, and Ludacris will push users towards Haagen-Dazs with an ad titled "Not So Fast, Not So Furious." So a whole bunch of that. And I do watch the commercials. There's Kendrick Lamar doing the halftime show. He's got 5 Grammys. And this will lead me into the halftime shows of all time. I've told this story many times over the years, but I think it's appropriate to tell it on Super Bowl weekend. I used to go to Super Bowls, whether I had tickets or credentials or not, for a number of years with my friend Joe Fowler, who had a brief run on television here back in the 1980s. And we went to Detroit in January of 1982. This would have been Super Bowl 16. It's the first one that the 49ers won with Joe Montana and Bill Walsh, and they were playing the Cincinnati Bengals. So this was not the Boomer Esiason Bengals. This was the Kenny Anderson Bengals, coached by Forrest Gregg. And it was the first cold weather Super Bowl. It was indoors at the old Silverdome, which was a mess to get to. They had to get a police escort to get the 49ers out of traffic to get them to the game. But it was really, really cold. That's the coldest I've ever been in my life. But on the day before the game, we thought, well, let's just go out to the stadium, see what's going on. So we drive out to the stadium. We park in the parking lot. Security in 1982 wasn't what it is now. And we see these buses pull up. And getting off the buses are people who are about our age. We're in our early to mid-20s. And as they're getting off the bus, they're handed a box lunch. And they walk right into the Silverdome. So we get in line. They hand us a box lunch. They don't know whether we're with the group or not. And we walk in and we roam all over the Silverdome. Well, that was Up With People. And Up With People was a bunch of fresh-faced kids who sang upbeat songs. And as the story goes, Commissioner Pete Rozelle watched that halftime show, and he said, you know, we got to come up with something better than that. But they really didn't for a long time. And in 1992, January of 92, when the Redskins played the Bills, the halftime show, I forget what it was, but it wasn't very compelling. And I was at a Super Bowl party where the people knew that once the game went to halftime, that Fox with the Wayans brothers and Jim Carrey, part of that group, they were going to do a live halftime show. And that's what we did. As soon as it went to halftime, we turned over to Fox. It was funny. And then they knew to time up their halftime show to when the game would resume that year it was in Minnesota. And so we went back to the game. And that's when the NFL realized, because they saw the ratings that Fox got, so we got to do something. And for the game in 93, which was played at the L.A. Coliseum, or maybe the Rose Bowl, might have been the Rose Bowl, they had Michael Jackson. And Diana Ross came in on a helicopter. And the halftime show extravaganza was born. So USA Today has put together a list of the top 10 halftime shows. And see if you remember these. This was the one in Tampa in 2009 where the Steelers beat Arizona 27-23. That was a great Super Bowl. That was Ben Roethlisberger beating Kurt Warner in that game. They won 27-23. But at the half, Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band showed up. And Bruce got on stage and he said, "Step back from the guacamole dip, put the chicken fingers down, and turn up the TV." And he played 10th Avenue Freeze Out and Glory Days. And at least for people of my generation, that was a great, great halftime show. This was one that I was actually not in the stadium to see. I watched the first half, but I was doing the pre- and the post-game show for ESPN with Mark May, so I had to get back to the tent in time to do the post-game show. I didn't want to get caught up in all the traffic leaving the stadium, so I didn't see this. But I heard about it as soon as I got into the tent. This was the Janet Jackson performance in Houston in 2004, the one where New England beat Carolina 32-29. It's perhaps the most famous halftime show of all time. This is ranked number 9, and it's most famous for Justin Timberlake accidentally ripping open Janet Jackson's shirt, exposing her breast, and that's where we came up with the term wardrobe malfunction. That's number 9. Number 8 was at the Super Bowl 50, February 7th, 2016. It's Peyton Manning's last game, Denver beating Ron Rivera's Carolina team 24-10. Coldplay showed up and had Beyonce and Bruno Mars unannounced perform. By the end, all three performers joined forces with Just the Way You Are. Very, very nice. Number 7, Bruno Mars, which was the Super Bowl where Seattle blew the doors off of Denver. This was the outdoor game that was played in New York in 2014. And you had the Red Hot Chili Peppers performing in this one. Dog of a Super Bowl, but a terrific halftime show headlined by Bruno Mars. Number 6 on the list, February 5th, 2017. This is the greatest Super Bowl ever played, where New England overcame the 28-3 deficit and beat the Falcons 34-28 in overtime. That was in Houston, and that was Lady Gaga, who belted out "God Bless America" as she was coming down from the top of the stadium through the roof. She sang "This Land Is Your Land." She sang "Poker Face." And it is a memorable halftime, but the game was so much more memorable, I think many people forgot about Lady Gaga. SoFi Stadium. This was Super Bowl 56. This was February 13th of 2022. Snoop Dogg, Dr. Dre, Mary J. Blige, and the game was a good game. The Rams held on to beat Cincinnati 23-20. Number 4 on the list was in February of 2020 in Miami, where Kansas City beat San Francisco 31-20. That was a comeback by the Chiefs, and that was the first Super Bowl championship for Patrick Mahomes. Shakira, Jennifer Lopez, in that one, I don't remember it all that well, but that was the last pre-COVID Super Bowl. Number 3 on the list, February 3rd, 2013 in New Orleans. This was Baltimore beating San Francisco. And this is the one where the lights went out, right? The lights went out on that one. But Beyonce was the halftime performer in that. That is ranked number 3 all time. Number 2, February 2nd, 2002, I did see this live. This was in the Superdome, the post-9/11 game, where Tom Brady won his first one, driving the team down the field for the Adam Vinatieri field goal to win it. 2017, U2 performed, and he performed the Streets, and he also performed Beautiful Day and MLK, where the Streets have no name. Remember that? That was in February of 2002. And number one, I don't think anybody would argue this, Prince singing Purple Rain in the rain in Miami in 2007 as Peyton Manning won his first Super Bowl as the Indianapolis Colts beat Chicago 29-17. So that's number one all time. And I don't think you could beat Prince singing Purple Rain in the rain. Three-peat. Joe Montana tried it, didn't get it done. Remembered that as he appeared on the set on Pro Football Talk with Mike Florio and Chris Sims.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, in San Francisco, we were in the championship game against the Giants, right? And I ended up getting hurt in that game, and I always joke and say, well, when I left, we were winning.
Yeah, right.
I don't know what happened after that, but I think the thing that weighs on you the most is the health part of it, right? So those teams like back then, Giants, us, Washington, Cowboys, were always late into the season, right? And your off season gets cut shorter every year, and your body needs to come back, and it's hard to do that, especially that many times as the Chiefs. They've been able to do it. They got injuries were earlier in the year, right? Their guys were starting to come back healthy, and so things have to fall in place to get to there that many times in a row. So the pressure's on the Chiefs, I think, more than
you do.
Really.
You feel like it's on them.
Yeah, I mean, they want to win that three-peat, and they've been to this. These two teams have been to the dance together before.
Yeah.
But I think Philly's is sitting back and thinking the same thing. Well, hey, we know we've been here with them.
Right.
We know we can beat them. And we got a chance. And the thing I think they, like old saying, you got to keep the ball out of Mahomes' hands.
Like you had to keep it out of your hands.
You just try not to give him as many touches.
But the mentality of it, I guess, what you're saying is you were exhausted. Did you feel the pressure in that year? Like where you were like the three-peat, like you're talking like how they might feel it, the pressure's on them? Did it wear you out a little that way?
No, not really.
No.
I think it was some excitement.
It was, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think the physical part you can't take care of.
Right.
I think it wears on you after a while.
Yeah.
But the excitement sometimes and the adrenaline gets going.
Keeps it going.
But I mean, because I joke and say, everybody said, well, for me, they said, well, you won a Super Bowl, why do you want to go back? I goes, have you ever seen a kid who's never had chocolate?
Well, yeah.
You give that kid chocolate, and all that kid wants is chocolate from that point on. It's the same. Once you win one, it's like, now I understand what we're playing for.
Yeah.
And what it feels like to win one. Now you want it more.
Yeah.
And so
it's addicting.
I think it's going to be a fun game to watch.
Yeah.
You talk about the difficulty of playing deep into the season, though, and into the postseason Super Bowl and then doing it again. Think of how different it was in your day with the rules that had guys beating the hell out of each other, and you're playing on cement with a thin layer of green plastic on top of it. The recovery had to be much more time-consuming than it is now.
Yeah, but we were really fortunate with Bill Walsh, and because everyone wanted to come play for us once they found out that in training camp we never wore pads. We put pads on the scrimmage, or we'd put pads on to time up a running period, just shoulder pads, and then they'd come right off. During the week, like I asked one of the wide receivers of the 49ers, I go, you guys hit during the week? You guys in pads? He goes, yeah, every day, all day. I go, seriously? I go, Friday? He goes, yeah. I go, when you have a veteran team, that Bill decided that I would need you healthy on Sunday. I don't need you healthy on Wednesday. So I think a lot of times, too, and how the teams prepare during the weeks, it's tough. It wears down on you at the same time.
Yeah.
Because, veteran team doesn't need all that.
Right.
You just need to see. Bill said, I can make you put the pads back on. If I don't see the effort that I'm looking for, I'll make you go back. And he would do it on occasion just to prove that he could do it.
Right.
But I think how you prepare is, and I think probably the Chiefs are in that. I don't know how they practice. But
yeah, they're a little more like what you're talking about. Yeah. They're a little more free, flying around, doing that. It's not always about, put the pads on.
We had defensive linemen who come out with a stool and sit and watch practice.
That's unreal.
Well, the rules have changed, too. I mean, Walsh was ahead of his time. They're not allowed to hit like they did back in the day. But Joe Gibbs' teams hit. They hit all the time. They hit 3 days a week. And it seemed to work out for him then. Of course, I don't think he couldn't do it now with the new rules. But, yeah, Walsh was famous for that. But Andy Reid, who's the coach of the Chiefs, remember, he comes off the Walsh tree. He worked for Mike Holmgren in Green Bay. Holmgren coached with Walsh, so it all trickles down. And, not hitting during the week obviously paid off for the 49ers in those days. And now it's pretty much the norm in the NFL. I think if Joe Montana went through a full week with the team, not playing anymore because he can't, he's even older than I am. But if he were to watch practice, he would see that the rules have changed dramatically in how teams prepare. And you hear things like, well, that's why the tackling is so bad because they don't practice it. On the other hand, it's a meat grinder of a season. They're playing 17. They're going to go to 18, and they're eventually going to go to 20. And you just can't be hitting for 22 straight weeks because you're going to have 2 buys mixed in there. But that's down the road. But 18 is coming. It's coming like a freight train, and there ain't anything anybody's going to do about that because the money is going to be just too good for the players to turn down on this. Also, regarding post-Super Bowl attention, what's going on with the Capitals and Alex Ovechkin is just incredible. Ovi had his 26th goal last night. He's now 16 away from breaking Wayne Gretzky's record. I think he's got, 28 games left to play. So in 28 games, he needs 16 goals. That's doable. He's got 26 in 38. So 28 to get 16 might happen before the end of the season. I believe that it'll be better for hockey if Ovechkin does not get the record this year. It'll be better to have an offseason to talk about that. And I think that would be best for the organization and best for hockey in general. And then you start, looking at early season matchups. How do they do the schedule to get the most out of this? Do they have a national TV game early in the season that gets it out there? How does that work? But he came right back from the broken leg, picked up right where he left off, and continues to knock in goals. Had a goal last night. The Capitals are playing. This used to be a tradition. I thought they stopped it for a while, but it's back. They have a game on Super Bowl Sunday. This is a 12:30 game against Utah. Utah used to be the Phoenix Coyotes. They don't have a nickname yet, so they're just going by Utah. It's kind of like Washington football team. And then Hubie Brown. Hubie Brown is 91 years old. He was a great coach in both the ABA and the NBA. I remember when I was in college and Jim Lynam was the coach at AU. One time he took us out. We were the radio crew for the campus station. Took us out for beers. You could drink at 18 in those days. We went to the tavern at AU and had beers with Coach Lynam, and he was telling us how great a coach Hubie Brown was. Now, this is 1977. Okay, so this is a long time ago. And he said, he's got a team with the Atlanta Hawks that aren't very good, but he's getting the most out of them. And he said, if you want to see the greatest camp speaker ever, go see Hubie Brown speak. Hubie Brown, the greatest motivational speaker. And post-coaching, he's morphed into an incredible broadcast career. He's been on TV for ages, going back to, I guess, the 1980s. So he's been on TV maybe 35 years. He's 91, and he's going to do his last game on TV. I believe it's with Mike Breen. It's going to be on ABC prior to the Super Bowl. They get out of the way for the Super Bowl. 2 o'clock game, 2 o'clock tip in Milwaukee, Philly and Milwaukee. And he was on with Chris Russo the other day to talk about that on Russo's show on Sirius Mad Dog Radio. And the interview wrapped up this way. And it's emotional. It's tragic. But in a way, it's kind of uplifting. This was Hubie Brown with Chris Russo.
Last thing, Hubie, you've been a man of great faith your whole career and your whole life. You've had a lot of tragedy, and you're still going strong. Fill me in on that quickly. Let me hear.
I lost my 57-year-old youngest daughter 2 years ago. And my wife had dementia, and she passed away after 5 years in early June. And then my son, who was 54 years old, passed away with a heart attack in November. Grieving makes you grow up. Grieving on a daily basis when you're the only person in the house. The memories, the facts that you learn about that your wife only moved 8 times. And she had four children, and she put them all through colleges, one with a doctorate's degree in epidemiology. She never complained about the new house, the new church, the new neighborhood, the new schools for kids. She just made it all happen. And every day I appreciate her more because I never could have gotten to where I got without her, because she would always say the same thing. When we went from high school to college, and then to the pros, she would always say the same thing. Let's give it a try. She never once said no, dog. I was fortunate to be married to an incredible woman, 63 years, had a beautiful family. We're just running a tough period of time right now. But every day you wake up and you realize the sacrifices that she made, from her career to being a mom, getting 4 kids through college, and all the moves, and then all of the aggravation of coaching at every level when things weren't going well. She was able to keep us going. So I'd just like to say one thing. She was the heart and soul of our family, and I can't thank her enough on a daily basis. Thank you.
It's UB Brown with Chris Russo, and a 91-year-old man who says grieving makes you grow up. Think about that. And God, what a tragedy. In 2 years, he lost a son, he lost a daughter, and he lost his wife, who'd been suffering from dementia. And the tribute that he gave to her was incredible. And, you know, Hubie is a guy, yes, he was a coach, and there is a generation of people that remember him as a coach. He made a comeback not that many years ago, coached, I believe, in Utah for a year or two. But his mark on the game of basketball is indelible. He won a championship in the ABA with the Kentucky Colonels, came and coached the Hawks and a couple of other teams along the way, and always had rosters that, you know, didn't quite measure up. He coached the Knicks for a while, didn't have the players to match up with the Boston Celtics and some of the other teams in the East. He was the first coach that Patrick Ewing had when he came into the NBA, and, you know, never got to the top of the mountain in the NBA, but the work that he did as an analyst for all those years on television and on radio, and his passion for the game and the way he treated other people and continues to treat them is really remarkable. And that tribute that he gave to his family came so much from the heart, and it'll be great to see him do one more game coming up on Sunday. It's Milwaukee and Philadelphia, 2:00 on ABC. Let's finish with this on an uplifting note. Here we are heading into Super Bowl 59. If you would have said heading into Super Bowl 58 that there would be real hope that by the time we get to Super Bowl 60, that there will be a Washington team in the Super Bowl with a quarterback who, if he's not the best in the NFL, he's knocking on the door. And he would be 26 years old, right? Or 25. I guess he'd be only 25. He just turned 24. 25 years old, taking the Washington football team into the Super Bowl. He just won 49 out of 50 votes. The other vote went to Brock Purdy? No, Brock Bowers. Brock Bowers, the tight end for the Raiders. The numbers that he put up set rookie records, rushing yards, 891, I guess breaking the RG3 mark of 850. Completion percentage, 69%, 25 touchdown passes, 100.1 passer rating, 891 yards rushing, 6 rushing touchdowns. There are also some more specific numbers. His 78.1 on-target percentage was the highest of any rookie quarterback since the merger in 1970 with a minimum of 8 starts. He is everything that they could have possibly hoped for, not just in terms of talent, but in terms of attitude. In the way that he approaches his craft, the amount of work that he puts into it, the deference that he has for others, the way he is a teammate and, doesn't think he's bigger than anybody else. These are things that, only could have been dreamed of for that long period of time. So I look at this Super Bowl and I say, yeah, it's the Mahomes show and it's Mahomes' world until he loses one. And even if he loses one this year, like Tom Brady, he'll come back and win a few more. And maybe he'll break Tom Brady's record along the way. Brady played another 15 years past where Mahomes is now. Realize Mahomes is not yet 30. Brady played until he was 45. So down the road, this may happen for him. But just to think that Washington will have a team that will be in the conversation next year to get back to the Super Bowl for the first time since 1992. And, who knows who it's going to be along the way. There are other, maybe Baltimore gets there. Maybe Buffalo finally gets there. Maybe the Chiefs are back again. Who knows? But what a difference in feel in February of 2025 versus February of 2024. Bram is coming up next with his thoughts. I will have a full recap of everything that went on in Super Bowl 59 on Monday morning at 9 a.m., and I will see you then.